And that produced a shock wave that went throughout the entire galaxy, the entire solar system. And that's why Mars is heavily cratered on one side and having very few craters on the other side. The side that was facing Maldek when it blew up got smattered like a shotgun, and the other side was basically crater-free. And that's when Mars stopped being a habitable place. Now, the people didn't die immediately, but there was a rapid de-escalation of civilization. They had to get off the planet. It was terrible.
Welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Courtney Brown. Dr. Brown, welcome.
Well, Sean, I'm really happy to be here, so thanks.
All right, so let's go all the way back. I don't think I've seen an episode where you kind of cover your origin story. So let's go all the way back. How did you get into remote viewing?
Okay, well, I was a professor, tenured at a major university, and I had always had extraterrestrial contact in my life, going back to when I was a kid. It was just a normal routine thing that happened. And I was open in the sense that when I was a child and sleeping in the night, I would wake up, there would be two gray guys on the right side and two on the left side, just about almost every night. And they were just there. I was never harmed. Nothing was ever wrong. They just assumed they were protecting me, but there they were. This isn't something I had to bring up through dream memory or anything like that, or memory recall or anything. They were there. And in the morning I sort of said, I wonder if I should tell my mom. And I never did. Okay. So I've always had extraterrestrial contact throughout my whole life. And then the military came out with their remote viewing program. A certain number of them were released and allowed to talk about it publicly. And the military they knew it was going to come out, so they wanted to contain it within the New Age bookstore nutty community. And so they released these people and let them teach it in, that New Age environment. And I saw one of their early presentations. I said, this is great. I want to be able to do that. And so I tried to get training in it. And finally, I was a meditator also. I did the TM Cities program. That was back in the day. That was called Transcendental Meditation. That's a meditation form that all the Hollywood stars used to do. Now almost nobody does it, but back in those days, that was a thing. The Beatles did it, things like that.
Why don't they do it anymore? Is there something better?
The meditation process itself is really great, but the guy who started it, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, he was really great in the beginning. Then he went sort of nuts, in my opinion, sort of halfway through, and became xenophobic, and he became sort of really wacky. And the problem was, it started when there was an assassination attempt on his life. One of his followers gave him some orange juice laced with poison, and that killed him. He was resuscitated by Deepak Chopra's father. So Deepak Chopra carried him. He died in the hospital. Then he got him up to the floor where his father was, and they put chelated minerals in him and got it, and so they resuscitated him. But Maharishi was never the same after that. He became sort of paranoid. He had his followers sort of surround him, and it was. So I always said I was a follower of early Maharishi when he was still innocent. And the cost for TM was about $20 back then. It went to a few hundred, but but now the only people who learn how to do that form of meditation that I know of are like children of teachers of that form. And he just stopped expanding. He sort of thought of the West as sort of an antagonistic, how dare they, and then charged thousands of dollars to learn how to do meditation. And he just went sort of bonkers, in my opinion. But I did that form of meditation for a long while, and it was very good. The form of meditation itself was really great. It worked really well. You deeply settle. It's a mantra-based meditation. And I practiced the TM Cities program. Now, I'm not... Those opinions that I just gave about Maharishi are just my own opinions. I'm not saying that that's what happened. I'm just saying that was what my perception was of what happened in those early days. So I could be totally wrong, but based on what I was seeing, that's how I interpreted what was going on.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
And though the movement stopped expanding, and they had a university called Maharishi International University that later had to rename itself to Maharishi University of Management, and they had 2 domes, and every experience I had there was wonderful. They meditated in the domes. They had like 2,000 people in each dome, one for men, one for women. It was just a marvelous experience, and I assume the experience is still marvelous for people who do it. It's just that you don't hear about it anymore. Most people I talk to never even heard of Transcendental Meditation. But back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s and things like that, that's the only real form of meditation that anybody knew about. And all of the Hollywood stars used to do it. And again, my experience with it was always really great. My interpretation of what happened to Maharishi afterwards is totally just a personal interpretation that may or may not be correct. But anyway, that's sort of, but it's still, for me, in terms of my own development, it helped me because I was able to go deep inside, and I was able to silence everything so you could hear a pin drop on the other side of the universe type of thing. Well, I had been meditating deeply up at Maharishi, at that point, Maharishi International University, for like 5 hours a day. And I was also teaching at the University of Michigan at in their summer program, where I taught a course in advanced nonlinear mathematics. And there was in the middle of my meditation, I was approached by this guy, this light being, you might call, just blasted right into my consciousness and said, the course that you need is ready. You're to call this person right today, this afternoon. It'll be all worked out. And I said, what? And then the guy disappeared. Anyway, that afternoon I tried to call, and I called one of the guys, and he said, it's amazing that you called. We just got the course set up. You'll be my second student. So that's how I learned the basic CRV process. I took that course, and that resulted... Who was
the person?
I don't talk about the person. I don't say the names, and I don't talk about the person. There was a very bad falling out between myself and most of the military guys. They went off in their own direction, and they became nuttier than what I just talked about with regard to Maharishi. But during that time, I wrote a book called Cosmic Voyage, which was the first expose about using remote viewing for studying the UFO phenomena. And that was a really great and interesting book. And at that point is when for military people, they like to fight. That's all they do. They fight. I saw so many lawyer letters going back and forth, so many accusations. Then they meet up in a meeting and they all pat each other on the back and shake their hands. It's like they just like to fight. And then after they get together, they're all friends again. And then they go out and battle again with, legal claims and everything crazy. And that was just nuts. I mean, I was a professor. You don't even raise a legal issue when you're dealing with stuff. So anyway, I was meditating, in fact, at Maharishi International University when it was still there in the domes. And again, I was expecting sort of when all of these sort of bad blood. No, I'm not upset with all the military people. One of them, for example, is Lynn Buchanan, and he's an angel. And I love Lynn. I love Lynn. He's actually on our board of directors at Farsight. So, I mean, he's just amazing. But, and some of them were okay, but most of them were just, fighting is their middle name. That's the best way to think of it. And if you look at all there's a few thousand people that claim to be hobbyists or followers of CRV, which is controlled remote viewing. Other than some of the students, find a single project, a public project where they use remote viewing to study something. Just find one out of these thousands of people. But they're all worshipers of the military guys. Now the military guys have gotten older and they're phasing out. So the organizations that they started are not what they used to be either, because they serve their purpose of worship. And so I was just going in a completely different direction. And some of them were really upset that this academic coming out of nowhere who wasn't in the military program was writing a bestseller book about using remote viewing for studying extraterrestrial life. And they were pissed. So, it just, me and the military guys, except for angels like Lynn Buchanan, who's he's from another galaxy or something like that. But, and he also has issues with the former military guys. And he was in the military with them. So he also he knows them, but he can tolerate them more than I can.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
Anyway, but I was meditating at Maharishi International University, and when sort of the blankety blank hit the fan and all the military guys were yelling at each other and lawyers were going back and forth and everyone was upset that my book was coming out, and that was Cosmic Void, which you can get, by the way, for free. It's out of print now, so it's free as a PDF download on my personal website, which is CourtneyBrown.com in the speculative nonfiction section. And also the sequel, Cosmic Explorers, is also available as a PDF that's free. You can upload it to Kindle and read it on your Kindle or something as well. So anyway, I was meditating, and I tried to meditate for an entire month, about 5 hours a day, in the domes at Maharishi International University. And every experience I ever had personally with the meditation process was always wonderful. It's just the organization that was bonkers, but what they taught was great. So I was meditating there for like 5 hours. In fact, they used to joke, some of the teachers used to joke that they invented Transcendental Meditation in order to calm them down to recover from the organization of Transcendental Meditation. They used to joke about things like that because they knew the organization was sort of wacky. Anyway, so at least that's how the conversations went back then. But the meditation itself was great. And I'm assuming for those people who learn it today, I'm assuming it's the same. It's just that hardly anybody learns it as far as I know. Anyway, so I was meditating in the domes, and after 30 days, I got no messages at all. Then I said, okay, well, the heck with this. I'm just going to meditate for the fun. I'm just leaving everything go. I'm just going to. And so I was there for the evening meditation, and I was leaving the next morning. And I just sat down and I was just closed my eyes. And 5 minutes into it, this light being popped into my head again. Now, this wasn't subtle. When you're sort of in tune with things like that, and you're deeply settled, this is not subtle. This is like being hit on the head with a hammer. I mean, this is like very obvious. He comes into my head, boom. And I said, oh, okay, yes. And he said, you're to proceed with your plans as you're developing them. I said, okay. And he said, all the resources that you need will come to you at the time you need them. And then there was a pause. And then he said with emphasis, but not before. Meaning he wasn't going to throw $1 million at me and then have me squander it. So all the resources that I needed would come to me at the time I needed them, but not before. And then he said, and you're going to have to break off with all the military guys. They're going in a different direction. Then whoosh, he was out of there. And I said, no. And I sort of with consciousness ran after him. Couldn't find him. That was the end. Anyway, so I finished my meditation, no other messages. The next day in the morning, I meditated, got in the car and zoomed back home. So, that sort of started that formal journey. In the meantime, I had been dealing with extraterrestrials myself for a long while. So this was not new to me that I would get like messages and things like that. I very often anyway, that's a long story. That's another whole story we can get into, the types of contacts. I never talked about the actual contacts that we have had at Farsight, the very overt, obvious, real contacts we have, until January 2022. And then we were informed that there was going to be an attack on us where what we call the Bad ETS were going to have it publicized that we were part of a blue, what do they call that? A blue beam or something, when a false flag,
Blue Beam.
where we were part of a extraterrestrial intervention and that we were and that was part of a bad thing. And you can introduce yourself to people only once. So if we waited, so we never told people about the extraterrestrial contacts that we've had like forever. But when that happened, we said, okay, we have to come clean and just sort of tell everybody what's been going on. Because after we started with the original CRV remote viewing, we developed our own procedures, which are much more advanced than CRV. And we got those a lot from the extraterrestrials themselves. They were telling us how to change these procedures. I tried to change them myself because I knew they had problems. They couldn't do what we needed to do. But I was like, I was just incompetent. I wasn't able to get it. And then they would tell us, like a professor and a graduate student, a mentor type of relationship. They said, no, do this, nudge it that way. They wanted us to still struggle with it and put it together so we could claim it as our own, but they fixed it. And then, so the procedures that we use now were called advanced SRV and for scientific remote viewing. And to be quite honest, we didn't think of those things up. We got those things. Well, we thought of them, but like a graduate student can claim that he or she wrote their dissertation, but they couldn't have done it without the mentor. So, all right. So anyways, and we have a lot of other procedures that the public doesn't even know about: technology transfer, social, political procedures for describing societies, all types of things. And, we figured them out, but with help. Does that make sense? I don't want to say we were uninvolved, but I don't want to claim full credit for it either.
Right.
So, we're not using military procedures. We can say military derived in the sense that we got the original military ones, but what we do now is not recognizable from what the military people did. All right. And then, so that sort of started it. And then we built up the Institute, and the Institute is a nonprofit, Farsight Farsight Institute. And that's a IRS-approved 501c3. And we also have a for-profit, Farsight Inc., which is the bigger corporation. And that is the one that runs our streaming service and web servers and things like that. And our streaming service is farsightprime.com. And it's totally equivalent on a technical level to Hulu, Netflix, Disney, Paramount Plus, whatever. Okay. Now, we have studios. I'm sitting in one studio now. We have another studio where we do things. We have boardrooms, and we have lots of things. However, you can sort of, when you look over all the infrastructure, you're in media business yourself. You know how hard it is to get good cameras and get all the lighting and get studios set up and everything like that. I would like it if you told me I was a genius to be able to put this all together like Elon Musk or whatever, but I'd be cheating you. I did. They told us what to do. They wanted us to use the extraterrestrials. They wanted us to use good cameras. When it got to the point where we needed to show people how to take video recordings of UFOs, they sent somebody that knew how to do that. Now, that guy probably didn't think he was coming because extraterrestrials were doing that, but he was the lead traffic control person in the Washington, D.C., the Reagan Airport, the big airport, the international airport. He was the lead air traffic control person. He had also been in a number of other air traffic control towers, and he also had published in aviation journals. His name is Lincoln Lounsbury, and he came to us on his own ticket. He flew in. He came with PowerPoint presentations, Excel spreadsheets, video examples, the whole thing. He came with it, and he showed us how to take video recordings of invisible extraterrestrial spaceships. He showed us examples and everything. And these things are totally invisible light. So he told us how to convert things. He told us how to do it with like an iPhone or an Android phone. And then he told us, but I said, we need to do better equipment. And he said, of course. He told us the exact cameras to buy. He told us you need Panasonic Lumix GH6, which at the time was our leading camera. And then we had to send it out to a company called Life Pixel. He told us the exact company to get it converted to a full spectrum. Then you had certain filters that had to be put on to produce infrared. And that was a camera that needed to be used because it could shoot at 120 frames a second. And that was necessary because the UFOs were traveling at 20,000 miles an hour, which is 32,000 kilometers an hour. And if the Titanic flew over your head, you're not going to see it, even for a blink of an eye, if it's going 20,000 miles an hour. So you have to shoot it shoot at 120 frames a second, not seeing anything, and yet it's better if you have a good camera like the Panasonic Lumix GH6. That's a lot of information to record at 120 frames a second. You have to shoot at 4K. You can't shoot at 1080p. You have to shoot at wide angle because you can't see anything. You can't see the UFOs, so you don't know what you're shooting at. And the first time we did it, following exactly Lincoln's advice, we got like 30 UFOs in a 15-minute period. My jaw. Now, I've been studying UFOs and interacting with extraterrestrials since I was a kid. Even my jaw dropped. I said, "What? They're over my house?" And we're talking all types of. And later on, I can, show you examples of the things that we were capturing. So then it became important for us to show other people how to actually do this as well. So there was this combination of doing the remote viewing, of which we were given, and we were told how to actually do that better. And then we were also told, there was the issue of showing physical evidence of the extraterrestrials that would require specialized modified cameras. And then we were told that. So I'd like you to say that I was a genius for figuring all that out and for producing the studios and getting all the equipment done. Like, what? You think I know how to do that? I'm a professor at a university. I know math and social science and stuff like that. What do I know? So anyway, so that's the type of help we've been given all along. And come around January 2022, we decided, we were basically told that we have to tell people what's been going on. Now, it was too early to do it before that. We didn't want to deal with the skepticism and all the, but come around January 22, we had to just sort of say to everybody, whether they were laughing or not, we're telling people what happened.
So is there something special about that time period? Because you could call this a synchronicity, you could call it whatever you want, but that's when I started this channel.
What time period exactly are you talking about?
January 2022.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, but they told us at that time, around that month, that the whole issue of not talking about it, about how we've been given help, had to end, and they wanted us to be totally open. Now, we have regular meetings. We've had them in the past a lot, at a secret location down at the beach in the middle of the night and things like that. And we have actual meetings, and they come down a lot, but they're always using ships that are cloaked, and they have to stay invisible. But I can see them, and our remote viewers that work at Farsight, they're highly trained. They can also see them. You would not be able to see them, but we can see them clear as day. We know what they're wearing, how tall they are, where they're sitting, where they're standing, and the whole thing. But that's been after years and years and years of training to be able to see things like that. And that's part of the remote viewing process, to get the mind, the physical mind, used to receiving those images. All right, so we have meetings on a regular basis, but the U.S. government, the Israeli government, and a few other governments have written agreements with a group of extraterrestrials who we call the Bad ETS. These are written agreements. Now, you don't have to believe me or trust me or do anything like that. This was stated bluntly by Chaim Ashed, who was the director of the Israeli Space Directorate, and that's their version of NASA, for 30 years. He's also a retired general, decorated, and he's now a college professor. And he actually stated in an interview, which he thought he was going to get away with because it was in Hebrew and a Hebrew publication. It turns out, however, that a whole bunch of people know Hebrew, and it was immediately translated into every language possible, where he talked about the written agreements between the U.S. government and the extraterrestrials. Now, he doesn't call them the Bad ETs, but Anyway, they are the Bad ETs. And they do that to get formal permission to operate in the Earth environment in exchange for technology transfer for the crash UFOs. Now, the crash UFOs are not in dispute right now. You have David Grush and many others giving congressional hearings, open congressional hearings. Now, David Grush, for example, he still works at the Pentagon. He still has Pentagon clearance. And he's been given official permission from his side of the Pentagon to say all of this stuff that he says in the congressional hearings, both public and private, with regard to the UFO crash retrieval program. However, there is the other side of the Pentagon that wants him wiped off the face of the earth. So the Pentagon itself, the military, is split. Half of them want the disclosure process desperately to occur. The other half of them are aligned with what we call the bad ETs, who are giving technology transfer in exchange for the written formal permission to operate. Now, the group of ETs that we work with and have worked with are called the Good ETS. That's what we basically call them. And you can't identify them in terms of species. Most of the bad ETs are really run by a group that are reptilian, and they really do exist. And they exist in very large numbers, but their concentrations are underground in places that the U.S. government allows. The good ETs, there's a few reptilians, but in terms of all other species, they're all over the place. Both sides have the same species, except on the good ET side, there's not many reptilians. So the good ETs, however, are what I would consider have a fanatical adherence to the concept of free will. Meaning they won't do anything unless you do it, unless you decide you want it. They just have to get permission. And here we have these written agreements between the U.S. government and the bad ETs. And what the bad ETs are doing for this, the U.S. government, that side of the military, really wants this because they want the tech. They want the tech. And that's how the American secret space program goes on. So we're building our own versions of UFOs, and we're developing our own tech. And a lot of these, see this cell phone?
Mm-hmm.
This tech is very highly advanced. You can't develop that in just a decade or two. So what's happening is a lot of the crashed ETs, the military takes some pieces of technology and ships it off to private companies to develop and distribute. But then there's a lot of other stuff like the propulsion drives and things to counteract acceleration and things like that they keep that totally secret. But the bad ETs help them with that, and the U.S. government really wants that. In exchange for the permission, the written permission, free will permission to operate here. And what the bad ETs are fundamentally doing is the largest human trafficking operation on the planet Earth. They do awful things. They're interested in genes, they're interested in people, they're interested in slave force, and this is a huge population that they use and exploit, and they want to use and exploit into the future as well. And so for that, they want the people. They don't want the copper, or they don't want the gold, they want the people. And the good ETs refused to do the tech transfer to the U.S. government because they didn't want the U.S. government to start focusing on weapons. Now, the good ETs or the bad ETs are not worried about the technology transfer that the U.S. government is getting. They could wipe out the American secret space program in a blink of an eye, either side. So the reptilians aren't saying, my gosh, we're arming these people and they're going to beat us. No, there's no chance of that. But the U.S. government, nonetheless, that side of it really likes that a lot. And so what we have David Grush coming out of the other side of the military that actually is giving him formal permission to talk in front of U.S. Congress. And he's just talking about the crash retrieval program. But he's not talking about who's shooting those craft down. And that's the big thing. And what they're doing with the people after they crash. So the ship crashes, the U.S. government swoops in, picks up the ship and the survivors and brings them back to secret locations, hands the survivors over to the bad ETs where they are tortured like you have no idea. And then the bad ETs give them a little tech assistance in figuring out how some of the technology works and the thing. Now, the good ETs are in a jam for this situation because they cannot defend themselves. The bad ETs cannot shoot down the good ETs, and the good ETs cannot shoot down the bad ETs because that would start what is currently a Cold War and turn it into a hot war. So neither one can do that. But the bad ETs can arm the U.S. secret space program and then have the U.S. secret space program go out and shoot down the good ETs. Because the good ETs are here trying to help humanity, and if they defended themselves or knocked out the American secret space program, then the Americans would say, oh my gosh, they're aggressors. And that would throw the Americans even further into the hands of the bad ETs. So the good ETs are in a jam. They have to let themselves be shot down. So what happens is sometimes the good ETs, their ships, get into a situation where they're sort of tricked into being a little bit more vulnerable And then the U.S. government either knocks them out of the sky with the pulse from the ground, an EMP pulse from the ground, or has ships that swoop in whoosh, and hits them, and then they crash. They don't want to destroy them completely. They want them to crash. And then the David Grush stuff, which is coming out of the Pentagon, takes over. The U.S. government comes in, they pick it up, they retrieve the stuff. You have what they call non-human biologics, which is a stupid way to talk about people. But what they call non-human biologics, that came out of the congressional hearings, and non-human technology. And these are my friends. These are people that I know, and they crashed their ships, and anyway. So that's what's going on. And so the good ETs have been in a situation where they cannot show themselves visibly, or they'll get shot. There's an agreement with the U.S. government and the bad ETs that everything must be secret. Nothing can come out. Nothing can come out. And they essentially run the planet, the bad ETs. They are not dominant in the solar system. There are actually more military resources from the good ETs in the solar system than the bad ETs, but the bad ETs dominate the planet. And they have these damn free will agreements with the government. So, and the good ETs are fanatical adherents to their free will thing. And so what's happening is that the good ETs have to let themselves be shot down, but they're slowly but surely working with the masses. They have no serious, significant influence with the political, military, or, well, some military supports them a lot, the half that wants the disclosure, but they have no significant influence with the political leadership or the corporate leadership or the media. So what the good ETs have been doing, since the political leadership is totally corrupted from the perspective of
from all perspectives,
from all perspectives, yeah. So what the good ETs have been doing is they've been working with the masses. They've essentially won the hearts and minds of the masses. And one of the ways that they've been doing this is seeding information into the minds of scriptwriters in Hollywood, for example, when they're sleeping. So the scriptwriter wakes up and says, "Oh, that's such a," they have dreams. "That's such a great idea. That's what a new episode that will be, or what a new TV series that will be. Well, this will be a great movie." And that's where Star Trek came out of. That's where Star Wars came out of. That's where the Matrix movies came out of. That's where a whole host of science fiction stuff came out of. Now, they will not force the scriptwriters or the producers to produce those things, but they'll drop the ideas into their head, and then free will, they're free to choose these things. And so you have a huge movie industry and book industry that is spread throughout the world, introducing these new ideas in terms of science fiction. But now people are sort of ready for the idea of extraterrestrial contact, for the idea of understanding that there's been galactic conflict. There's these ideas are all, and the idea of the Force with George Lucas and Star Wars, that was very important. The Star Wars thing is very interesting because George Lucas we did a whole project on George Lucas. So I'm not speaking as an authority of George Lucas, just an authority of our remote viewing project that we did on George Lucas. And George may completely disagree with it, and that's fine. This is just what we found, what we discerned, what we perceived. He was involved in the galactic conflict way back, like as a bureaucrat. And
in terms of like a prior life or something.
Pardon me?
In terms of a prior life, right?
Oh, yeah. And he was like a bureaucrat, and he sort of has sympathies with what you might call the good side, the free will side that you might associate with the Jedi. And when he died, he was eventually born here. And he created Star Wars. But Star Wars, from our perspective, was not just him creating it out of whole cloth. He may think that, and that's probably what he'd say if he was being interviewed by you, that this has nothing to do with a previous life, he would say. But from our perspective, he was remembering. And he had such incredible detail, remembering all the different, and he brought up all these ideas of interspecies, interactions with the species, galactic conflict, an evil empire, free parts of the galaxy, non-free parts of the galaxy. All that stuff is and planets blowing up. All that stuff is actually correct. That actually happens. And for example, planets blowing up, we did a whole project on this. The asteroid belt is a result of a planet that blew up. Now, the traditional astronomers say, no, that's just leftover junk from the primordial solar nebula. But that's crazy. And there have been some mainstream astronomers that have said that's crazy. That, these are big astronomers, and have said there's some obvious reasons. Some of the asteroids are very large, like the Ceres asteroid and so on. And you need a gravity well to bring all that dust together to produce hard rock like that. So there has to have been a planet to begin with. Also, the surface of these asteroids show evidence of extreme searing heat, which would not have happened from a primordial dust left. And if it was primordial dust, it would still be dust, but these are solid big rocks. And what happened was there was a planet there. Some people call it Maldek. And there was a battle. There was a war between Mars and Maldek. And one group of extraterrestrials that were dominantly reptilian were on Maldek, and the other group was on Mars. And the Martian people were losing. And Mars used to be, it's not in dispute anymore. It used to have huge oceans, but there was life all over the place. And they were losing, and they fired missiles at a weapons depository, a nuclear weapons depository on Maldek that was controlled by the reptilians, and just blew the whole planet up. I don't know if they were expecting to blow the whole planet up, but it ignited. Now, it's easy to blow up a planet. Let me tell you how to blow up a planet. We can blow up this planet in a blink of an eye. The Scandia Labs.
Yeah, Sandia National Labs.
Yeah, Sandia. Yeah, there's a the whole bunch of nuclear weapons down there. There's like hundreds, maybe 1,000. So if you have one of those detonate, it would detonate all of them, and you'd pop the balloon. The Earth is not a solid planet. It's a glob of liquid molten rock that's 8,000 miles in diameter. And it has an 8-mile thin crust on top of it. It's a balloon. And you can pop the balloon if you pop a hole in it. There are people that are actually trying to drill a hole into the crust to get into the deeper areas, and they don't realize how dangerous that is. That actually happened 70,000 years ago. And there was something called the Toba catastrophe theory, because I think it was focused on a volcano that blew up in Toba, Indonesia, but that's not what happened. But in that same area, the civilization that we often like to refer to as Atlantis, which was an advanced civilization, they were actually given some deceptive extraterrestrial advice about digging, and they were drilling into the planet on that area, near the New Zealand area. And they popped a hole in the crust, and they blew it out. And then there was this huge, now that area of the world has the thinnest crust on the planet, and it's the largest concentration of volcanic rock on the planet. The antipode, which is the opposite side of that spot on the planet, is a spot about 1,000 miles west of Portugal in the middle of the ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean. And that used to be above land. That used to be like, Europe didn't end at Portugal. It went another 1,000 miles out.
Is that the place near the place near the Canary Islands, like the caldera that they have there?
I'm not exactly sure where the Canary Islands are. So, but
they're off the coast of Spain, like. Well,
yeah, but
Portugal,
it would be well beyond that. I have a globe here. Anyway, let me bring out my globe here. So here's Europe.
Yep.
Okay, so let me see. You can see.
Yeah, I can see.
Spain there, okay? So Europe used to go out to about here. Okay? And this is the antipode to the spot on the opposite side of the planet, out here near New Zealand and Australia, okay? Sort of over here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when they drilled the hole out here, it popped it here, produced an explosion that was huge, and then this side of the planet, or Spain, off the coast of Spain, sunk. It went down. And so we did a whole project on the ruins that are available down there. And you can actually see them with sonar imaging. And we did a whole project on that. And that was really interesting because, the mainstream sonar archaeology, geology people saying, no, those are just lines that are caused by the sonar. They call them tracks that are caused by the sonar imaging tracks. But we had actually a person who we knew, who is the daughter of one of the people who involved in the military remote viewing, who was actually in the military, and she went over to the people that had the raw data on those exact spots that we studied. And she went and these are the people that were the tech people that worked on the computers. And she said, look at these images here. People are saying these are like sonar tracks. These are tracks from imaging. What is this? And they laughed. They said, oh, no, you're serious. No, these are real elevation changes. Then they pulled up the data in front of her and said, no, these are not tracks from the imaging. Those are real elevation changes. But you can see like where cities were. You can see the lines and where the blocks were and everything like that. And those are real elevation changes. So the government tries desperately to cover this up, of course. They also have a lot of projects dealing with that civilization that destroyed that civilization 70,000 years ago. They have a lot of projects in Antarctica right now dealing with that civilization because there's tech underneath the ice, and they want to be able to get at the tech. So that's you can look it up in Wikipedia, called the Toba catastrophe theory, where they blame it on a volcano, but it wasn't a volcano. It was something it was things that humans did. So that's how you can blow up a planet. You just pop it. You pop the balloon, and if you make a big enough hole, the whole planet will blow up. So that's what happened to Maldek. In that case, it wasn't a hole that was being drilled into the ground. It was a whole bunch of nuclear weapons. And that produced a shock wave that went throughout the entire galaxy, the entire solar system. And that's why Mars is heavily cratered on one side and having very few craters on the other side. The side that was facing Maldek when it blew up got smattered like a shotgun, and the other side was basically crater-free. And that's when Mars stopped being a habitable place. Now, the people didn't die immediately, but there was a rapid de-escalation of civilization. They had to get off the planet. It was terrible. And we did another project on Iapetus. On Iapetus, they have a spot. A moon of Saturn. Mars. And there's a spot that's a really weird black spot. That was caused by the debris wave when Maldek blew up and it hit it. Now, you should see the funny stories that mainstream astronomers come up with trying to explain that black dot. They change the stories from time to time, but they're as nutty stories as you can possibly imagine. There was a debris wave. It hit the planet. They hit that satellite. It's tidally locked around Saturn, so it doesn't like rotate. So the debris, it held steady while the debris wave hit it. On Iapetus, there was a facility, a recreation facility, like a luxury hotel type thing, where people were, the solar system was well populated and they had ships that could go around. And you see the UFOs. The UFOs travel at enormous speeds. They can travel in interplanetary space in a matter of just seconds, minutes. So they actually had like a hotel out there, and we did a whole project on that hotel during the collapse. It was really sort of weird because they had people out there, and suddenly they couldn't go home. Maldek was blown up, Mars was a wreck, and like, where do you go? And that sort of ended that. But anyway, that's sort of a long answer to a question of how I started with remote viewing, but...
It's a good start. I think we have about 7 minutes left in this episode. So where are we today with this conflict between the beings that are here and then the beings that don't want to interfere with free will?
Right now, there's a standoff between the good ETs and the bad ETs, and there's global crises that are forming. Now, the good ETs are not starting the global crises. Those are actually being started by the bad ETs because there's been a huge movement for disclosure. And when the bad ETs see that happening, one of the ways, it's a psychological prison, this planet, not a physical prison where you have bars like people get locked up in jails here. It's a psychological prison. And the bad ETs are taking advantage of the fact that the good ETs will not interfere as long as there's a free will decision to keep things going as they are. So what's happening is that the crises are building, and The good ETs are helping to pack the crises together so they all happen at the same time. But that's what's happening. You have the Russian-Ukraine thing happening. The Middle East is going to blow up. And then you possibly have the extension of China into Taiwan. There's never going to be a better time for China to try to grab Taiwan militarily than when the West is totally occupied with the Ukraine and the Middle East type situation. And the Middle East situation is expanding into other countries. Iran, possibly Turkey, certainly Lebanon. And so there's going to be a shootout, a major escalation. And so when all of this happens, at some point, somebody's going to think about using nuclear weapons as a last resort. And when things like that happen, when it looks like you might get a planetary destruction, then the good ETs are going to be able to intervene. And that's when the bad ETs and the good ETs will be visible. That's when you get something we call the shootout. Now, we have actually a project coming out in like 6-7 days on the shootout. And that's the shootout that people will see. And so, Sean, you will see it yourself. Everybody will see it when it happens. And then the disclosure process is full blown. And then we have a situation then. This is the plan that the good ETs are trying. Once the disclosure process is full blown, then we will get a situation where the populace will say, what? We don't want to be aligned with those guys. The bad guys have been doing human trafficking and all that bad stuff. So we want the good guys. And then the military and the political leadership will have no choice but to realign themselves toward the good ETs. And the planet will no longer be controllable by the bad ETs. The bad ETs are experts at controlling a population like this. They developed methods over 1 million years. I mean, they're really good at it, but it requires secrecy. Once secrecy is blown, then you're going to have a situation where it can no longer be controlled anymore. And so then the bad ETs are going to be in a situation with a planet that they can't control anymore using their normal tricks of manipulating the leadership, the media, and things like that. And a serious military conflict with the good ETs, in which case the bad ETs would lose personnel and ships. So you're dealing with a planet they can no longer control anymore, plus the potential loss of personnel and ships. Then at that point, the bad ETs will back off. They'll retreat. They'll leave. And that's when you have the freedom that's when humanity gets freed. And the good ETs then come in and start the recovery process of getting people off this planet and so on. Now, you have to understand that we can cover this in the next interview that you have. But when people are people, you have to understand they're not really just human beings. People are what we call isbies. Isbies are someone who is for the purpose of being. We don't use the word soul or spirit because of the religious baggage that comes along with those words. But all of us are isbies. We are isbies. I'm an isbie in this body. You're an isbie in your body. Everybody's an isbie in everybody's body, whether you're dealing with extraterrestrials or all isbies. The extraterrestrials know this deeply. In humanity, the way the prison is run, people are processed, and they're processed, and we can talk about this in the next interview, they're processed in a way after death and before birth so that they lose all of their memories and their capability of remote viewing and telepathy and things like that through this process. And then the ISBE doesn't even know it exists. And you actually think that the physical body is the real thing. Mm-hmm. The extraterrestrials, and we can sort of end with this note, the extraterrestrials, both the good and the bad, think of this planet as a planet of zombies. Think of what zombies are. People that run around with no memory, they don't know who they are, they go around hurting other people, destroying everybody, and they don't know who they are or who they're with. That's humanity. And we end up fighting. So that's where all these wars are coming from. The bad ETs trigger chaos by just manipulating the mentality of the leadership, and then wars get started. And then you have these conflicts. And then when the wars get started, you no longer hear about disclosure. Disclosure was actually kicking up really a lot before the Middle East and the Ukrainian stuff started to really ramp up. And then as soon as those wars sort of kicked off, you didn't hear about David Grush in the news anymore. It wasn't a major news story. And, it's having a difficult time coming back.
It never was. That's what's so odd about it, right? Well, it was on News Nation, but like CNN and like
the media
traditionally
is
reputable news sources.
The media is very tightly controlled. And it
Yeah.
all gets back to control by the bad ETs. And they can control it easily. They just manipulate the minds of the leadership of the media organizations. But you do get outlets like News Nation, The Hill, and things like that. And The Hill is associated with News Nation that were reporting it. But you don't hear about it anymore because the wars are the thing. And that's what the bad ETs do. They're experts at things like that. And the wars and stuff go on for a long time, and they sort of occupied the attention. So the good ETs are trying to compress everything to a point where the bad ETs can no longer control the agenda. And then the good ETs can be forced. And that could cause a free will decision on the part of the masses to align themselves with the good ETs. And then the good ETs can intervene. And at that point, that's when that scenario happens. And actually, we just came out with a project last month and a revision of that, which was better recorded just a few days ago, on Israel's future with regard to the wars that are going on. So talk about a timely project. And we have new stuff coming out in our Deep News program, literally on the conflict, the upcoming conflict between between Hezbollah and Israel. So this war that's going to happen, we actually have the full remote viewing sessions of what happens in the war. So we're trying to get those out as fast as we can as well. We had no idea that we did that project with the expectation that our project would come out before the war happened. But the war is coming across is activity on the ground is so rapid, it may happen before we get our stuff out. So we're trying to rush that stuff out. But yeah, we want people to see that what we do is real.
All right, Dr. Brown, it was an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to discussing the prison planet concept much further in the next episode.
Great.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support because they get something out of it. They have a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much and keep watching. I really appreciate it.